Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a two-game college football slate here. Obviously, we have NBA as well. I have a video up for that already. If you do like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help the channel a lot. I really do appreciate it. Before I get into this slate here too, just make sure to check out the links in the description for Discord and other things. Uh, really do appreciate it. And shout out to all the YouTube members and all the people in Discord. Let's go and get into this slate here. So we have New Mexico State, Louisiana Tech, and then Liberty versus Western Kentucky. Both these games have some utility here. I do think New Mexico State ends up pulling up the upset here, as Louisiana Tech is a -2.5 favorite. So I do think I like New Mexico State from the betting perspective there. And then Liberty Western Kentucky, I do think Liberty wins, and I think that they'll cover the spread at -5.5. So might be my two picks for that game. The over-unders are very tight, and so I'm not going to pick those today. You can check out more of my picks on Sportsbook on DraftKings, and so check that out as well. Let's go and get into the slate though here. So we're going to start with our quarterbacks. Um, we have an interesting situation with each team, so let's go ahead and get into those teams here. We're actually going to start with Louisiana Tech because they have the most strange situation at quarterback. Louisiana Tech has Turner and Bachmeier, who both are probably going to play some. I'm not sure which guy's going to start yet, but last game Turner started and then Bachmeier played most of the second half. And I suspect that something similar like that is going to happen. Both of these quarterbacks have not been particularly good. Though Turner does have some upside, as he does have some good running ability, but he does throw a lot of interceptions. So he is in play, but he's high risk, high reward. And really, with the other three quarterbacks, it's hard to roster anybody from Louisiana Tech when it comes to the quarterback situation, other than the fact that they're nice and cheap. Let's look at New Mexico State's quarterback, Pavia. Now, he's my second favorite quarterback on the slate simply because he rushes the ball a lot. He's had 90 rushes for 525 yards. He's also second on the slate in total passes and tied for touchdown with the other two quarterbacks. They all have 16. He has more interceptions than the other, but he definitely gets a lot of utility because of his rushing ability. However, he's not the only quarterback that does that, so he's not a must-play by that stretch, and he's got a tougher matchup than Salter does. As for we looking at Liberty here, that will be Salter. He's the other guy that runs the ball a ton. He's also got 85 rushes for 497 yards and 6 touchdowns, very close to the same as Pavia. From a defensive perspective, Western Kentucky has been better defensively in Conference USA than anybody else, but through the air, they really haven't been all that great, and so he's going to have a lot of upside in this one if he decides to throw the ball some. But he still runs the ball a lot, and he's got a lot of advantage because of his ability. He rushes quite a bit a lot of times, and has a lot of potential for touchdowns and yards. And so I do think he's a great option on the slate. He's probably my favorite quarterback. But Austin Reed for Western Kentucky also in play here. Now he's been up and down throughout the season, but he's had some big games lately, and he has a really nice matchup here. He does throw the ball a lot. He's going to throw the ball more than any other quarterback on the slate by a lot. He has 16 touchdowns and 1,900 yards on the year. He doesn't really run the ball though, so do keep that in mind. And he hasn't, you know, thrown the ball away too much, so he's done pretty solid with the yards as well. His fantasy production has just been a little bit inconsistent. Obviously, with the other quarterbacks running the ball a lot, that's going to hurt his chances a little bit to be the top quarterback, but he's definitely in play here, and so he's definitely a viable option on the slate. Looking at our running backs, this is where it gets really sticky. So we'll start with New Mexico State here. The obvious choice here for their team is Star Thomas. He's got the most rushes, though he doesn't have the most yards, as you know they have their quarterback who actually has run for more yards here on the ground. But Star does get the most touches here, and he has 4 touchdowns on the season. He's had some solid games, though he hasn't really broken the 100-yard matchup this season. But he does get a few passes through the air when he's one of the few running backs on the slate that actually does. So he definitely has some potential from that perspective. Monte Williams is the backup for him, and he does get a good amount of touches, and he has been getting more yards per carry than Star has. So he definitely lands some viability here at a minimum price. Though he's high risk, high reward because some of his floor is extremely low. But I think both guys actually have some potential today, especially in a nice plus matchup here. As for Louisiana Tech, this is going to get really crazy. So Shelton is their lead back, and obviously if he was to play, he'd be a viable option as he's had a really solid season so far. He has really nice upside, but he looks questionable and probably somewhat doubtful. And then their backup running back is Keith Willis, who's already been ruled out. And their third string running back is Thornton, who's actually done pretty decent this season with a couple decent rushing games, especially in the last game against MTSU. But he's also questionable, or I guess at least probable now. So there's a lot of concern there. Who's going to be the starting lead back? And if all three guys are out, then where does that even go? So we have a lot of questions for this team. But overall, I think that it's probably pretty avoidable to use a running back from this team as they also face the toughest rush defense on the slate. Looking at Liberty here, we have an obvious option in Cooley. He's probably my favorite option on this slate. He's also got the most attempts and yards by double anybody else. He's at 122 attempts and 726 yards and 6 touchdowns. Now he doesn't really get any passes through the air, but that's okay. He's scoring big bunches the last couple of weeks, and I look for that to continue here. He's had a pretty tough schedule early in the season, but right now, going through Conference USA, he's just dominating everybody, getting lots of opportunity, and so I do like him here. Obviously, his quarterback does run the ball as well, so he's going to split the carries some with them, but they're going to run all over Western Kentucky in this game, I think, and that should be to your advantage. As for Western Kentucky, there's not a whole lot to like at running back as they throw the ball a ton. They really don't run the ball too much. If you have to use somebody from this team, then Marquise Steep is the best option, as he's the only guy that gets a lot of rushes. But he really hadn't had a great year. He's only had 2 games over 10 fantasy points, and so that is a concern here. But I will say that they also are facing a tough rush defense, so he's pretty avoidable as well. Overall, Cooley and then either New Mexico State or a pick from Louisiana Tech, depending on who starts, will be the best options from that part of the game. Looking at wide receiver here, we are going to go through each team here again, and so we're going to look at New Mexico State here, and Brady and Hudson are the top options. Now Brady's got more catches and yards, but he has less touchdowns than Hudson. But they do face a pretty good situation here, and I do think they're both viable. They're also a little bit cheaper than some of the other teams' guys, so they have some utility. Hudson's got 15 catches for 331 yards, which puts him as one of the better options on the slate, especially with the 5 touchdowns. But he's still a high risk, high reward as he doesn't always have big games. Looking at Louisiana Tech now, Smoke Harris is going to get the ball a lot no matter who is the quarterback for this team, as they've learned to just throw the ball to him as much as they can. And he looks to have a really solid game here. He's still only had 3 touchdowns on the season, which is quite crazy, but he's getting the ball a ton now, and as you can see, the last few weeks he's had some really big fantasy output. I think he's probably my favorite wide receiver on this slate, especially with this price point being pretty reasonable at $7,000. Then we'll look at Cyrus Allen for Louisiana Tech, also a decent option. He's been a little bit more inconsistent than Cyrus has, but even with the quarterback situation, he's getting some looks, and he's kind of been our best play, but he's nice and cheap, and he's got the third most catches on the season for anybody on this particular slate. Moving into Liberty here, we're going to look at CJ Daniels first here. Now, he's nice and cheap here, but he's only got, they don't throw the ball that much, and so he's the guy that gets the ball the most, though, from the team. And he's got 24 catches for 4 touchdowns on the year, but as you can see, his floor is very low, though he does have a good ceiling. Sibley has been interesting. He doesn't get a lot of catches, but he's managing to get a lot of yards out of those catches. And so he has a higher floor than Daniels has, but he also has a lower ceiling. But he's had a pretty solid season, so he's a good contrarian option as kind of a value play on the slate. And then Henshaw for Liberty, that's their tight end. Now, he's only got 13 catches, but again, he's doing pretty solid with them, and he's scoring some touchdowns, which has really given him some upside in this fantasy perspective. And he's got a nice favorable matchup here, so I think he's a great option to really save money if you want. Looking at Western Kentucky here, obviously Corley is the top option on this team. He's a favorite target, and he's getting a lot of opportunity. He's had some big games. Obviously, he had some lackluster games, but even a lackluster game for him still gets over 10 fantasy points most of the time. And obviously, we need him to have a big game here, but he is capable of a solid game in this matchup, and he has a nice upside here. Now, Messer has been a guy that has been good for most of the season. I mean, he's had some ups and downs, but he really he just kind of disappeared the last couple of games, so he is a little bit of a concern from that perspective. I feel like the Dalvin Smith has actually come in to take a lot of his attempts and stuff, and Smith looks like he's starting to do some things. After week 1, he looked like he was going to be the second target for their quarterback, but right now he didn't really do all that much during the season, though there was been some injuries and stuff, but it looks like maybe he's starting to get involved again, and so if he gets involved in this game, he could definitely be a great option on the slate. And then Katie Hutchinson for Western, also in play. He's really been inconsistent throughout the year, but he's starting to get a couple touches the last few games, and he's had some more attempts towards him. But the last game, he probably had a decent little game. Now he doesn't have but one touchdown in the year. He is definitely a Hail Mary approach because he's dirt cheap, but he's definitely capable as a decent option. I do think Hanshaw from Liberty is a safer pick and under the sub 4,000, but he's definitely a contrarian choice from that. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.